So I'm going to spend about 2 minutes on Learning House. Not that this is a Learning House commercial, just so you know who is actually putting on this conference if you don't know who we are. Our mission at Learning House is to help people better their lives through education. That's why we exist. And we get to do that through our partners. Our focus is really on doing these three things. This is why folks partner with us. They want more students, they want more graduates, and they want better outcomes. And we try to deliver that. We work every day, hundreds of us every day, to try to make that happen. And we think we're doing a good job with that, and the work never stops. On the more students front, if you look back, the data that comes out in the fall of 17 for 2016 relative to 2010, our most mature partners have had enrollment growth of 25% over the time versus their peer groups of 0%, because we all know the last 6 years have not been great. More graduates, again, similar metrics, 27% over 11%, and better outcomes. Our retention rates are better than the averages, and on what we do in the enrollment side of the house is superior to anything that we can see on the marketplace. So we have, our work never stops, but we think we're doing a good job, and this is ultimately why partners partner with us. So just a quick element of who Learning House is. So Learning House was founded right here in Louisville, Kentucky by a former professor from University of Louisville named Denzel Edge back in 2001 with a mission to really help colleges go online, especially small to medium-sized schools. That mission continues today. We now have almost 500 team members helping us to achieve that mission. From the beginning, our focus was mainly on online programs, online courses. And it still is to a large degree today, 17 years later. That's about 80% of our business. You look in the top corner there. But over time, we've really thought about how can we help our university partners grow. And that's allowed us to get into other aspects of education. One of them is around enterprise learning solutions, which is really where we help employers find the talent that they need, get their employees educated. And so we've built that division up to both partner with employers, but also through kind of our university partners. The next opportunity is the Software Guild, which is a coding boot camp to really help people that are looking for just-in-time training skills around software development. And these are very much startup opportunities, and we're now partnering with universities around the Software Guild. The next is Learning House International. We found that a lot of our schools were facing similar challenges on recruiting international students to America, and so we partnered with another company, eventually acquired them, to build out that recruiting function. And now we're working with 6 of our existing OPM clients around international. And finally, we do continuing education for K through 12 teachers in the brand called Advancement Courses. And just really the last couple weeks, we've had 2 of our partners partner with us there to offer graduate level credit in concert with what we're doing with Advancement Courses. So this is all really with the mission of helping students better their lives and helping our universities grow and thrive in the future. So this is our next slide, just to give you some sense of just the scale and scope of who Learning House is. Today, we have our OPM business, which is online program management, where we work with about almost 15,000 students. We have 27 partners. This year, we hope to graduate almost 1,600 folks, and we've already signed 5 new partners this year, and that work continues throughout the rest of the year. The Software Guild is going to educate about 400 students this year. We have 7 partners, and most of the students that come in graduate, so we have 375 grads, and then we've signed up 1 new partner this year. And then Advancement Courses, which is continuing education for teachers. We have 13,000 teachers we expect to educate. We have 5 partners there. Graduates is not really a metric we use, and we've just signed 2 new partners. And then finally, with Learning House International, we expect to educate 210 students this year. We have 8 partners, 40 folks graduating, and 4 new partners this year. So that's some stats about Learning House. That's about all you'll hear about the Learning House today, other than folks getting up here to give their advice and perspective on things. So I'm going to spend maybe about 10 minutes around trends and observations in higher education. This is a list of things that is certainly not exhaustive, but it's, we feel like we exist to really, what we like to say internally, as the great Wayne Gretzky said, skate to where the puck is going to go. So we have to be thinking about the trends that are going on in higher education today, and ultimately what we can be doing to create solutions in regards to those trends. So I'm going to list some of those to really set the context for today. You're going to be hearing a lot about probably all of these in different ways. Some of these are more solutions-based. Some of these are just, frankly, observations. Really starting with our first observation. This is a really interesting slide. I probably should have taken off the title to see, what do you, like asking you all what you all think this direct correlation is. But it's pretty amazing. At the end of the day, higher education is a counter-cyclical business, right? So I'm certainly not wishing for a recession by any measure because it's not good for the economy. However, what you can see here is if you look in around that 2000 time frame, that's when unemployment reached its peak at 9.8%. And you can see what enrollment growth did. So there's a lot of, obviously, trends that impact this, but we are in unprecedented times right now. We are at, I think it's roughly 3.8, 3.9% unemployment rate. We have not seen that for more than like 9 months in the history of America. And we've just had our first 2 months of that. So we're in a very amazing halcyon time for this country. Eventually that's going to change, right? And that would be a positive trend, most likely for higher education. But when we're seeing all these enrollment challenges, it's not an excuse. It's just, it's just important for people to understand that this is happening right now in the marketplace. So in light of that, student enrollments continue to decline. So this is going to start off maybe a little depressing. Sorry about that. It's going to end on a high note, I promise. But we like to look reality in the face. So as you can see here, the blue bars on the bottom, we've had 6 years of declining post-secondary enrollments. Many of you in this room have felt that. Online, which is the place that we've spent our time in, that number has been growing for as long as I've been in online education, since 2004. But that growth rate is declining, and it's getting down to the point where it's sort of flattening out, and EduVentures has recently predicted that it actually will flatten out to maybe even decline. I'm not sure if I believe that, but that's kind of where we are right now. So this is just a chart that is the Shiller PE ratio for the kind of finance folks out there. Certainly not predicting again a recession, but the PE ratio that we're experiencing right now hasn't really experienced. Usually it's signaling some sort of top of a market, right? And just that's what you can see just kind of looking back over the last 100 years. You can see the big spike in the dot-com boom in the sort of late 90s, early 2000. So that's kind of what's starting to happen today. Obviously the economy's been growing, but sort of valuations and other things. So this is something to just pay attention to that we like to look at. So we've been talking a little bit about demand. This is to really think about supply. So demand is under pressure. Supply is also under pressure. So even as less students are coming into the system or in the system, we track the percent of four-year institutions with online programs, which is now up to 59%, and the number of online programs per four-year institution. And that continues to rise. So that just means there's more competition out there. And really, that's why conferences like this exist. That's why we think Learning House needs to exist, that this is a hyper-competitive world, and you need to be doing the best you can do to really succeed. And I think you can do that, but this is just the reality of things. So I want to talk a little bit about changing, the competitive landscape changing, especially as you think about online, which impacts a lot of this. So closures, that's starting to happen. It's not every month that we're not reading about sort of another closure, especially in the small sort of college market. M&A, we have one of our representatives from Thomas Jefferson University, D.R. Whitaker, is going to talk about their experience that they've had merging Philly University with Jefferson University. And there's a lot of that sort of happening out there as well, which is kind of a classic sign of consolidation as sort of things play out in the market. Mega nonprofits, so the for-profits really peaked in probably 2011-ish, that time frame, went under a lot of pressure from the government and also just the weight of themselves. You've had the rise of these mega nonprofits, Southern New Hampshire, Western Governors, University of Maryland, Liberty. Arizona State's not on here, Penn State. They're powerful players in the market. A lot of them are approaching, if not eclipsed, 100,000 students. We compete against them every day. Our institutions do, especially from a marketing standpoint, and we're very well aware of that. What's also happening is the for-profits have kind of found a second life to themselves, or they're finding it appears, especially with a favorable administration around them. So you have Kaplan University selling themselves for $1, essentially to Purdue University Global, and they're hitting the world by storm. I don't know if you've heard their commercials on radio, on TV. I've certainly heard them on XM satellite. You have Grand Canyon that's going to be converting to not-for-profit. Ashford has announced its plans, and we think others will as well. So there'll be more kind of mega nonprofits that really were kind of at one point in their life not-for-profits. These are things to be aware of. They come with a lot of investment, a lot of power, and so this is just something that we need to be following. So another trend that I like to watch and think a lot about, because I certainly think this is not a favorable trend, is student debt outpaces income growth, right? It's one thing to say, a program is expensive, but if ultimately the outcomes aren't there for it, and the salaries aren't there for it, there's a problem, right? And that's basically what we've seen over the last decade, several decades, where median household income has only risen, 2.3% over 10 years. Student debt load, look how much it's increased over the last 5 years, and that's in a really good economic time. And now we're over, I think, approaching $1.5 trillion of debt. This is a problem that needs to reverse itself at some point. And I think, and I'm kind of going to hit on the next slide, but I think we're going to see a time of deflation in the market, right? And it's unclear really yet whether we're in deflation, but what this slide tells you is that, so tuition keeps rising, right? The sticker price keeps rising, but what we've seen now is we're above 50%, even though this only shows 44%. I mean, the latest report that I read was we're above 50% now on the discount rate, right? So what are really college students paying for college? I mean, ultimately, I think there's good news in all this for the students, not necessarily for the college if they're not adapting, is that they're going to be facing hopefully lower tuition, more affordable tuition in the future because of competition and the like. But this is a problem for colleges that can't keep really raising tuition and expecting students to keep coming. So what's happened to sort of some of the reactions here? Free college is not going away, right? We have the Tennessee Promise. There was just recently an article about the success of that program. You've had New York follow that. Rhode Island is having a lot of success. Oregon, there's other states talking about it. Obviously, if Hillary Clinton had won, she wanted to do something at the federal level, So that's one thing that's happening there, and that obviously impacts the whole landscape. The second thing are these, what we call, or certainly Concordia St. Paul calls it, the tuition reset. We have two partners, actually three, that's another one that's not on this list, Concordia St. Paul and Avila, that have done a tuition reset as a way to really bring down costs, make it more affordable. Ultimately, the net tuition is pretty similar to the school, but it also signals to the market so you don't actually turn off parents and students that probably wouldn't even paid attention to the school. So they kind of go from a high discount, high tuition rate to a kind of a low discount, low tuition rate, which I think is a winning formula, and these schools are seeing that. MOOCs 2.0. So there's a lot. I mean, each one of these slides, by the way, hopefully I'm not just kind of like, you're like having some ADD here of like these are huge themes, and we can talk about each of these probably for an entire presentation. MOOCs is one of the areas that I think has had this hype cycle, and we're in some version of it right now. To me, I am watching the MOOCs very closely because they are now shifting to this model that is, call it MOOC 2.0, whatever it is, which is really partnering with schools, not just to offer a course online that has no credit, but actually can offer credit, right? And you have this triangle here is the IMBA, which is with Coursera and University of Illinois at Champlain, I think. And you can see what an MBA that I think was like $50,000 is now $22,000 from a brand university. They're doing a lot more stuff. Coursera, I think they did their first undergraduate degree that you can get through them. You have Udacity and Coursera and edX doing these micromasters, nano degrees. Everybody's got a little bit of a different name for it. As employers get more, accustomed to what those are, they might accept those just as in replace of degrees. So we really need to be paying attention to this marketplace and seeing how we can work in partnership with them and what else we can do there. This is a big area of focus for the Learning House. We have Jerry Hanley here from Merlot. to talk to us today about that. But the idea of the rise of affordable learning solutions, this is another great solution to the cost of education, right? We have, we know that textbooks cost, let's say, roughly $12.50 per student per year. Through the use of online open educational resources, that cost can come down a lot. That's a great trend, a best practice that we're really working a lot with a lot of our clients now on. Transfer credit is something that we work a lot with our schools on, creating really transfer credit policies. You can see this stat here, 343,000 students transfer annually. On average, they lose 13 credits, right? So somebody could do the math on that. That's a lot of money, that's a lot of time. And look at this stat, 40% lose all credit. So prior learning assessment, becoming generous and reasonable around transfer credit policies is critical, we think, to the success of especially those 30 million folks that you keep hearing about that have some college credit. Getting access to those students, creating really good transfer credit policies. We find our schools and prior learning assessment do very well there. And finally, competency-based learning, that is kind of one of those trends that is just a train going down the track that you cannot stop, nor should you stop. Western Governors every year grows, right? And despite they've had some issues with the Department of Ed, or not the Department of Ed, but the Office of Inspector General around their credits and whatnot, how they work. But adults, they don't have time to go to classrooms, don't have time for synchronous learning. CBE could be a really good solution for them, and mastering concepts really is a way of the future. So that's something also that brings the cost of education down as well. International student challenges. So I mentioned to you, Learning House conveniently got into the international business, and so just in time for the first year of declines in 10 years. But this is an interesting stat here. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but 5% of the post-secondary population comes from international students studying abroad, whereas 10% of the revenue comes from these students. So you always hear it. They pay full price, or something in that range. So think about that when you go from growing at 8% or 3% or whatever it is, and you start losing those students, what that actually does to a university. It hurts them hard. So that's the environment that we're in, especially outside of the big states like New York and Texas and California and Florida. Some of the smaller states, rural states, smaller schools, they're having a tougher time here. And that's why we think it's increasingly important to have a good strategy, because America's not going away. I mean, people love America. People are going to keep coming here. I believe that strongly, regardless of the political environment. So that will reverse itself in some form or fashion. Closing the skills gap. We recently did a study. We surveyed 600 HR professionals, HR leaders, and this is a really just a glaring statistic. 47% of employers surveyed feel higher education is not preparing students for the working world. That's a little sobering. However, we think there are a lot of solutions and a lot of schools that are actually doing a good job here. And just recently, I don't know if you saw, Walmart signed a deal with University of Florida, Western Governors, and I forgot the third school, to really partner, bring down the cost of education for their associates, and hopefully get a lot more of their employees skilled up. And so, we think there is a need for a much stronger bond between higher education and the workforce, employers, and Learning House is doing a lot in that regard to work with our schools in that front. So I'm going to end on a high note here, if that's possible. The room is very silent. I just get right down to business, so excuse me if we're not saying any jokes, but we're trying to get right at it. The increasing importance of higher education. So it's predicted that the U.S. population will eclipse 400 million people by 2050, right? And the 2050 is not, you can feel that. It's 30 years out, roughly. That's very reasonable time period. When you take that and you think about the economy of today and the economy of tomorrow and the need for skills, who is going to train the next version of an information security analyst, app developers, genetic counselors? These jobs didn't even exist a decade ago. So what my belief is, what our belief is, and you have these other stats that you have these, you hear this a lot, 6.6 million open jobs. We have many jobs that at Learning House that can never get filled because we can't find the skill sets that are out there. So the only really mechanism to get these people skilled up, whether it's people coming out of high school or people trying to change careers, is higher education. So whether it's a degree, whether it's a certificate, whether it's a course, it's just a whole series of educational pathways. Post-secondary education is going to thrive in the future. The question is whether your institution is going to be part of that solution, and we certainly hope it is. So my last slide is something that I think a lot about at Learning House, and I think I'm very proud of the universities that we work with because I think they're doing a really good job here. So you hear a lot about these three different themes in sort of education today: accessibility, affordability, and employability. And a lot of higher education, I find, gets it wrong in terms of kind of trying to create this symbiosis between these three variables. And I think it's our job, and if you look at kind of the sort of the square or the rectangle that's surrounding it, the student, the employer, the university, and the government, them all working together can really create this virtuous cycle that will allow that student and all these constituents to thrive in the long run. And I think, our goal at Learning House is to preserve this iron triangle to make it happen in society today. And that's why a lot of times when we work with partners, some of them are in this room where before we sign a deal, we have them lower tuition, or we don't make them, we sort of convince them together that it's the right call for the students, for the outcomes ultimately of that program. And so we're very focused on this at our school. I think you're going to hear a lot of solutions over the course of the next 2 days that's in line with this formula. And so that's really my sort of main topics of today. Hopefully, like I said, it's not an exhaustive list. Hopefully that sets the tone for the next couple days where you'll have a very productive time. Like I said, 3 takeaways that you can execute on your campus is all we're asking for. So just a few logistics here around, you got a Wi-Fi password you can set up to the internet there. We like folks tweeting. As you can see here, just use the hashtag LHConnect2018. We have a reception tonight. You'll get to meet, for a lot of our partners, a lot of the folks working with you every day that are back in the office right now. They will be here at the reception. We've got a post-summit survey, and we will also have presentations made available after the summit. So a couple quick things on the agenda. We have 2 tracks. One's called Spark, the other's called Illuminate. We're going to talk about, I mentioned a lot of these themes already, textbook affordability programs. We've got strategic from the start, building new online programs, partnering or peril around mergers and acquisitions. And we're talking about big data and empowering learners through big data, how universities survive the learner revolution, which we're going to talk about today. And then finally, upskilling 2018, which is where really the education can meet company demands. We've got 3 great keynotes. I'll save my remarks on Karen for a second, who's about to get on stage here with me. We've got Freeman Hebrowski. I don't know if you've all heard him speak, but he's spectacular, the former president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, or existing president. And then finally, Matthew Patinsky, who's the CEO at Parchment. He was the co-founder at Blackboard and is really, in my opinion, leading kind of a revolution, if that's the right word, around digital credentials, badging and that whole area, and has got tremendous perspective, and I think is an important voice to have at this conference.